most spectacular picture for a landscape painter, the most instructive for a geologist, is the one in Piazza al Cerchio of Sambuca, where the Cerchio flows for 5 and more miles among several sharp and wavy rocks, passing by huge sandstones and veins of marble, converted to slate and gabbri. That's what Emanuele Repetti wrote when illustrating the highway of the river Cerchio. Carfanius was the name of the Roman patrician who was given a land of the high valley of Cerchio as military services award. Since that old courtesy, the name of Garfagnana had its origins. The natural environment offered the primary resource to the communities who used to hunt, sheep farming, and agriculture. The wisdom of a culture capable of use the earth only without ruining it and use the resources without draining them. A genetic tie between man and nature. A human settlement made up by little groups and villages built with local materials which are still visible. Walls of stone, often without plaster, wooden roofs and lofts, where farmers could scatter corn, hemp, and other products to dry up. Man joined the strength of the river to activate water mills, where today we can find, by an artificial barrier, a modern power station. Where the Cerchio opens out among the high green barriers, there is Castelnuovo, chief city of the whole Garfagnana. Promoted as a city by a decree of the President of the Republic, Giorgio Napolitano, on January 7, 2010. Umberto I Square, in the center of the town, linchpin of the current urban organization, makes a meeting point of the social life. Of ancient origins, since 1430, the traditional market of Thursday. During those years, Garfagnana submitted voluntarily to the Estensi, and the Duke Nicola III granted the privilege of a weekly market and 2 yearly fairs. This square is also the place where guests can approach local customs by varied religious and cultural manifestations. You can also find, in the long starry nights, a little bit of magic.
Perché la gente pensa che te siamo d'accordo, penserebbe, ma io invece penso che tu sei d'accordo con la gente, perché non mi è mai capitato uno così. Controlla bene se sono legato e mi leghi stretto. Se qualcuno è arrivato da poco, te ne due il comico so io, non è lui. Allora. Vediamo un po', vediamo. Grosso parente che fa bene i capelli, lozione. Allora.
In 1522, Alfonso I d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, nominated Ludovico Ariosto governor of Garfagnana. Here I descended by different places with eternal sound confused by water. The territa with Sergio between two bridges, to supervise like my lord used to like, the flock of Garfagnana that followed him. Since his staying in these lands, his old home is still intact. The fortress Aristesca, symbol of Castelnuovo, among many governors between 1640 to 1642, had the diplomatic and poet Fulvio Testi as guest. Municipal base since 1927 until 1999, today it guests the permanent exhibition of the Ligurian Apuani, waiting to permanently become the base of the Museum of the Territory. Among the many displayed finds, which witness the daily life of the different civilization which constantly settled in this valley, in Neolithic, Etrusca, Ligurian, Apuana and Roman, also varied objects stand out, armament and religious kind, like the rare Etrusco bronze helmet and the little Roman statue in colored marble of the goddess Cerere. Like in many other towns nearby, you can admire important ecclesiastical monuments also in Castelnuovo of Garfagnana. St. Peter and Paul, dome of the city, has a particular story. The first documented memories date back to the 10th century, when the city got the role of the capital city of the Estense province of Garfagnana. The building became insufficient for the need of a very increased population. Completely demolished in August 1456, then renovation began. The new complex looked quite larger, with a bell tower 34 meters tall. Still today, a big slug carved in the stone and situated on the ledge of the roof of the bell tower symbolizes in a fun way the slowness with which all the renovations were done that definitely ended in 1504. In the center of the town, a suggestive natural path reaches the fortress of the Mount Alfonso. In the peak of the hill, you can admire the whole urban development of Castelnuovo. The Duke Alfonso II d'Este wanted to build the fortress in the second half of the 16th century to defend the capital city of Garfagnana by possible attacks of the Lucca's army. Extended on a surface of more than 47,000 square meters, inside it has a position of cannons placed on little dikes made with dry walls. A house with arches was used as accommodation for the troops. A monumental pit held the rain waters from the buildings by a net of channels and little tanks. It once was a strategical point of high importance and a rare example of military architecture for that time. Today, suggestive and panoramic viewpoint, used also for fairs and folkloristic and cultural events. bombing on the city, outposts on the Gothic line of the World War II destroyed most parts of the surrounding walls. Still are visible a few parts of northern Cortina between Porta Miccia and the rock. On the peak of the hill Croce dei Prunacci, a shrine is dedicated to the fallen of Garfagnana. A breathless view on the whole valley leaves wordless whoever reaches this deep in nature place. The sanctuary of Saint Rocco in the hamlet of Palleroso holds the memory of the fallen of the division Monte Rosa. At the war times, the oratory was used as armory, becoming this way a target for the UK and American artilleries. For the sanctuary, among old buildings used originally as stables, you can rise towards the 16th century door of Palleroso. A ramp of clean stairs that deserves a break to enjoy the awesome view, and especially to take breath. In fact, it's called the Way of Breathlessness. This place holds a few remains of the walls, which made of it one of the most fortified and important centres of Garfagnana. The church of the town is dedicated to Saint Martin. In the highest part of the village, there are the remains of the medieval cylindrical tower made of stone. Extraordinary strategical point as guard and defense of the valley. In many historical documents, Monterotondo is mentioned, a small village of pastoral and agricultural origins that was place of armed fights which caused fires and destructions in 1613, as it was in the boundary between the state of the Republic of Lucca and the Estense Ducato. The village developed again around the oratory of Saint Spirito, built at the end of 500. The bridge Castruccio, built in 1324 as will of Castruccio Castracani, Lord of Lucca, links the fortified center of Castelnuovo with the district of Santa Lucia. The first news of the existence of the homonymous church date back to 1300. An inscription of the architrave of the entry door attests the present access was made in 1618. An original episode of the urban view of Castelnuovo is the Vicolo Parigi, a suggestive path that, in parallel to Via 20 Settembre, descends the river Serchio by the old door that in medieval time opened the road system towards that high Garfagnana. Walking by Via 20 Settembre, you can reach the Alfieri Theatre, built as will of Antonio Vittoni and the Counts Luigi and Giovanni Carli. The theatre was inaugurated on August 22, 1860 and entitled to the King Vittorio Emanuele II. Golden arches in relief are expanded along the parapets of the stages. Decorated by hand of Davide Franchi, they enrich the entry and the royal stage. The valuable recent restore gives back glory and prestige to a building strongly wanted by the bourgeoisie of that time. A real masterpiece. One of the most important painters of the Italian Manierism was born in Castelnuovo in 1520, Giuseppe Porta, named Il Salviati. He worked especially between Rome and Venice, where he died in 1575. In the lagoon city, you can still admire big examples of his art. Among the many religious structures of the town and its many fractions, the monastery of the Cappuccini keeps in its walls a very particular story. It was built around 1630 as will of Padre Giambattista d'Este, whose real name was Alfonso III d'Este, Duke of Modena. As he abandoned his kingdom, he wore the cassock and retired in the monastery of Castelnuovo, where he'd ended his life in 1644. The entire complex is placed on the Mount Calvario. In proximity, on the hill of Saint Nicolao, you can still see a few wall remains that some experts believe could be the first place of habitation of Castelnuovo. It was part of the surrounding wall of the city, the earlier mentioned Porta Miccia, built by Castruccio Castracani as well. Among these 14th century walls, two constructions placed at the sides of the door with loopholes were used as defense. Known since the medieval time for its thermal waters, Torrite is a little village placed on the right river of the torrent Turrite Secca. Only some ruins remain of thermal establishment. You can see them by the right river of the torrent. As witness of the old settlement, at the top of the historical core, the remains of the little rock are still visible. Not far, you can find the beautiful Villa Bertagni, that guessed the Social Republic of Salò and German military command during the wartime. Walking by the bridge on the Turrite, you can reach the Church of the Saint Trinity. A first establishment of the complex could have started in the 13th century. same time belongs the church of Saint Andrea Apostol in Cerretoli, a particular core in which the inhabitants used to cultivate fields and chestnut trees. In the heart of the town, a typical building with altana. Placed above the entry door, a little plaque reminds that in 1928, inside this house, one of the first radio signals were received from Fillicaia, thanks to a particular two-way radio, experiment of the engineer Francesco Vecchiacchi. Olintodini was born here, in one of the most important and known families of Castelnuovo. He was a physicist, botanist and geologist. Since he was young, he was called to the Cathedral of Experimental Physics of the University of Pisa, that he left in 1831 to retire to Castelnuovo, getting from the great Duke the qualification of Emeritus Professor. In the town, each year, 2 literature contests are taken: a prize of poetry entitled to the poet Olintodini, homonymous and nephew of the better-known physicist, and the contest of fiction dedicated to Loris Biagioni, parliamentarian and administrator of the valley in the second half of the last century.
Anche se la mano che stringo ha la pelle di un altro colore, la sua anima, lo sento, ha dentro di sé quel pezzo d'armonia che a me manca.
Pier Messo, or Cadi Pier Messo, was a little aggregate of a few families that changed its name in San Carlo, when in 1628 the family Azzi built an oratory devoted to the saint. During the pestilence that the first years of the 19th century hit the population of Castelnuovo, the area close to the oratory was designed for the burial of many inhabitants, which died for that plague. The Church of St. Anthony Abbot in the homonymous neighborhood is particular for the urban view of the town and its characteristic bell tower. A typical tower of stone with beccatelli that make support to the bell cell. To honor the received grace, between 1602 and 1603, they built in oratory shape the Church of the Company of Visiting of Maria, known as the Church of Madonna or Madonna of the Bridge. The elliptical dome and the overhanging lantern characterize its area, and they were added in the 19th century. The Church of Saint Prospero and the one of Saint Bartolomeo represent the fulcrum of the close fractions of Antisciana and Gragnanella. Settlement of ancient origin is the fraction of Rontano, characterized by lined-up and stratified buildings along the old mule track that characterize the main way of the urban structure. With his 500 inhabitants, it's one of the most important of Garfagnana, and it became a fraction in the Napoleonic period. In Rontano, Monsignor Andrea Sarti was born, Bishop of Guastalla, Pistoia and Prato. As you get back to the provincial street, you can go to a climb to reach the 727 meters on the level of the sea of the core of the hill. Other little and characteristic settlements are Deccio, down of the valley that takes to Rontano, and Metello, where recent renovations transform old houses and stables into new houses for permanent use. The distance of some fractions from the capital city caused the defection of many houses. The families prefer to move down the valleys, also to find better climatic conditions. Among the famous characters of Castelnuovo, the Cardinal Pietro Campori shall be mentioned, who followed the fate of the Bishop Cesare Speciano, whose he was secretary after being apprenticed by the main European courts from Madrid to Praga. At the death of the Pope Paul V, its name began to be heard among the successors, and his election failed for only 3 votes. Pellegrino Turri also was born in Castelnuovo, the one who in 1808 invented the typewriter and the carbon paper. It was a newspaper, the ideal bridge with the several Garfagnini and Castelnuovesi that between the end of 1800 and the first decades of 1900 emigrated to Italy and abroad looking for fortune and establishing themselves. Founded in 1881, it still has the commitment of keeping alive the relations with the new generations, the Corriere di Garfagnana. The Garfagnana is a world apart, wide green meadows from which huge mountains rise like crystal. Endless chestnut trees, mottled hills by vineyard terraces, among grasslands and glades cut by the river's run, infusion of view and unmistakable culture, a natural monument of the man's work on this earth where there is, and there will always be, something more to discover.